And here we are with lecture 18. We ended up last time talking about the functions of the seminal vesicles, and we're now talking about the prostate gland. So on your lecture outline, two functions of the fluid that the prostate gland produces. And so number one, this fluid contains citrate to help nourish sperm cells. And number two, as you can see, contains the enzyme PSA to help liquefy semen in the vagina. So about this second one then, you'll recall from the Miracle of Life video that when, and you don't need a lot of notes here by the way, but you'll recall from that Miracle of Life video that when semen is deposited into the vagina, it immediately slows and thickens. And after a while, it liquefies again. And of course, this is necessary so that the sperm cells can start moving and making the way up toward the egg cell, assuming there is an egg cell at that particular point, high up in the fallopian tubes. And so again, then, this liquefaction is accomplished due to the action of PSA. Next then, the bulbourethral glands. And again, you guys are familiar with the location, remember, of all of these structures, all of these glands by now. So those two very small bulbourethral glands then secrete a fluid in very small amounts, and remember they're very small glands. And this fluid then lubricates the end of the penis to prepare for sexual intercourse. Following along on your outline though, most of the lubricating fluid for intercourse is produced instead by the two female vestibular glands located to either side of the vaginal opening. When we talk about this fluid called semen now, recall that semen, first of all, contains sperm cells, and of course produced by the testes, and then mixed with the secretions of, and recall when we went over the figure in the lab exercise showing the movement of sperm cells and what other structures add to the sperm cells to eventually produce semen. And so recall then that the seminal vesicles secrete, and the prostate gland secretes, and the bulbourethral glands secrete, and the secretions of these three glands then, along with the sperm cells from the testes, combine to make up this fluid called semen. The next several things we can omit on your lecture outline. And so under male external reproductive organs, we've talked about the structure of the scrotum already. We've talked about the structure of the penis already. We're going to skip over the details of erection and orgasm and ejaculation. And this gets us down now to section 22.3, talking about the hormonal control of male reproductive functions. And talking then about hypothalamic and pituitary hormones. And you guys are familiar with this from chapter 13 when we talked about the endocrine system. And so as a reminder then, male sex hormones are referred to as androgens. So ANDR, male, GEN, generating. So androgens generate male sex characteristics. Most of these are produced by the interstitial cells of the testes. And recall then the interstitial cells are the cells in between the seminiferous tubules. So picture a testis, picture it really, really tightly packed with these small tubes called seminal vesicles. And now recall that, again, the interstitial cells are the cells in between rather than within the seminal vesicles. And back to your handout then. So most of these androgens are produced by the interstitial cells, but some also produced by the adrenal cortex. And the hormone testosterone is the most important androgen, is the most important male sex hormone. In terms of the actions of testosterone then, and here you might want to jot down these actions, these characteristics that result are referred to as secondary sex characteristics. Testosterone then is resulting in these secondary sex characteristics. And as we go through the list, you guys will find that you're familiar with all of these. And so think about what happens with males at puberty. And going down the list then, so first of all, testosterone stimulates the enlargement of the male reproductive organs. Number 2, it stimulates the development and maintenance of these various, again, male secondary sex characteristics. We can include number 1 in these secondary sex characteristics. And again, now, in addition to talking about the reproductive organs, we're also including in these secondary sex characteristics the things listed under number 2. And so, again, think back to what happens to males at puberty. And so increased growth of hair on the face and the chest and the underarm areas and the pubic regions. So 2A. 2B then, enlargement of the larynx and the vocal cords, resulting in a lowering of the pitch of the voice. Number 3, thickening of the skin. Number 4, at puberty, increased muscular growth, broadening of the shoulders, narrowing of the waist. And E then, thickening and strengthening of bones. Other things stimulated by testosterone, other things that happen with more frequency or that happen more obviously with increased rates of testosterone production and release. And so number 3 then, testosterone increases the rate of cellular metabolism. Number 4, increases red blood cell production in males. And number 5, stimulates sexual activity by affecting certain parts of the brain. And finally then, for male reproductive system, notice you're being directed now to page 840 and figure 22.18, and we're looking here at the regulation of male sex hormones. So let's look at that figure. Take just a minute, and at the top of the figure, and this is our starting point, some information you guys are familiar with already. And so notice then we see the hypothalamus being diagrammed. You'll recall from chapter 13 that the hypothalamus produces these so-called releasing hormones. And here you don't have to specifically remember that we're talking about GnRH here, that we're talking about gonadotropic releasing hormone, but the hypothalamus is producing a releasing hormone. And remember, the effects of these releasing hormones are to release the anterior pituitary from inhibition, or another way of saying that, these releasing hormones, remember, stimulate the pituitary gland to release various hormones. And notice then that little plus sign underneath GnRH, again signaling that there's a stimulation of the anterior pituitary. There's again a stimulation, a release of inhibition, and the pituitary then, remember, secretes these various hormones. And if you think back now to chapter 13, and if you can still recall that diagram that we looked at with all these, well, with these 6 different anterior pituitary hormones, you may recall off to the right, the last 2 on the diagram were FSH and LH. And I don't care that you remember the names here, or at least you don't have to come up with the names again, but FSH I may refer to on a quiz, on an exam, as follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, you'll recall, I may refer to as luteinizing hormone. Following the progression then, FSH stimulates meiosis. You can kind of stop there in terms of what you're jotting down, if you are jotting some of this information down from the figure. So FSH stimulates meiosis. Let's not worry about the second one being mentioned there, where they're talking about inhibin. So again, FSH stimulates meiosis, and LH stimulates the interstitial cells to secrete testosterone. Following the arrow away from the testes, notice there are 2 arrows actually, and again, you can disregard inhibin. Inhibin has to do with negative feedback, and we can dispense with that. So notice the testes now are, again, secreting testosterone for the most part and other androgens. The effect then, or effects, are some of these secondary male sex characteristics that we were talking about, so increased muscular growth and so on. Take just a minute, and you don't need to jot them all down again. And then here again, we can disregard the rest of the figure, which has to do with negative feedback. So I won't ask you about those 2 red arrows going up from the bloodstream to the hypothalamus and to the pituitary gland. I'll give everyone just a minute. And with that, we are finished with lecture 18 and finished with the male reproductive system. We'll come back then and pick up, beginning with lecture 19, talking about 22.4, the organs of the female reproductive system. And we'll go on from there next time.